The 3060 12GB was originally released in 2021, and because of memory constraints from the AI market, this card has been re-released at around $339, and that puts it in a really weird spot. A lot of newer cards around this price will come with 8 gigs of VRAM. Meanwhile, this card from 2021 has 12 gigs. That doesn't mean it's faster, that doesn't mean it's automatically a good buy, but it does make it interesting, especially for Tarkov, because Tarkov is not like most modern games. The CPU and RAM side control most of your actual FPS, but the GPU still decides what resolution and settings you can play at. So I wanted to see what the 3060 12GB can actually do in Tarkov today in 2026 from 1080 to 4K and see whether this old card still has a real place in a Tarkov build. This game was built over a decade ago on Unity and it is extremely CPU heavy, to the point where your CPU and RAM probably make up something like 80 to 85% of your actual performance in this game. And that's why two systems with totally different GPUs can sometimes get the same FPS if the CPU is the same. But then I see people take that idea a little too far. They hear Tarkov is CPU bound and then they start saying the GPU doesn't matter at all. And that's one of the biggest myths around this game. The GPU is absolutely still a critical portion of your build in Tarkov, okay? It just matters in a different way than it does in most games. The easiest way to think about it is like this. Your CPU determines your FPS ceiling, your GPU determines what resolution and settings you can play at while staying near that ceiling. So if you take something like a 9800X3D and pair it with a 5090 at 1080, and then take that same 9800X3D and pair it with something lower like a 5060, you'll probably have the same FPS at 1080. At that point, the CPU is still the bottleneck. The GPU is not pushing your FPS higher in the same way it would in a lot of other games. So the GPU is still a critical part of a Tarkov build. It just decides the resolution and visual target more than the raw FPS ceiling, if that makes sense. And that's also why a 3060 12GB with the high-end X3D CPU is not as weird as it sounds for a Tarkov build. In a normal gaming build, a lot of people will say that pairing a 9800X3D with a 3060 12GB does not make sense. And for most games, I'd agree, but Tarkov is different. If your goal is 1080 Tarkov, the 3060 12GB can still be completely viable when the CPU is strong enough. So I started with 1080 native. That's the resolution I'd target with this card. I use my pure 70 settings, which is my optimized medium texture presets. And you can see the 3060 is handling it no problem. We are still CPU bound here. The introduction of DLSS 4 has been a literal game changer for Tarkov, because it actually looks better than native aliasing, even if you use quality as a scaling option. It's that good.